Thank you. I'm a licensed psychologist, and I have a private practice as a psychotherapist. And I'm also a remote viewer. I have the Western Institute of Remote Viewing, and I have taught thousands of people how to remote view. And I've witnessed many, many interesting sessions in remote viewing on all different kinds of subjects, from the spiritual to the mundane. I currently have something I call the Warriors of the Heart program, which is a more holistic program which combines remote viewing with personal growth, particularly emotional growth. So what I'd like to present today is some of the interesting findings in remote viewing, and also how some of the sessions that I have done and other people have done has given me a little bit different picture of reality. What is the nature of reality from a remote viewing perspective? So I ask the questions, how can we experience things the way they are? And can we experience ourselves the way we are? And I think those are profound questions, and the questions themselves have the power. It's not so much the answer you get, it's the question that has the power. Because when you ask a question like, can I experience things the way they are, then changes go on in the brain. Immediately, our brain on a non-local level seeks out vibrations of anything in this universe that has to do with that question. It could be conceptual, it could be people, it could be things, it could be event. But in my experience, when you ask a question, the brain, it's like the giant Google in the sky, so to speak, seeks those vibrations, and when then there is a resonance between us and whatever it is that we resonate to with that intention. And when the resonation is complete enough, there is an exchange of information between what we are seeking, what we are asking, what we are intending, and that which is out there which we are resonating to. And this is on a quantum level. So it's so that there is an immediate exchange. And this is a type of remote viewing. And this can also be called intuition, but it's the fundamental mechanism, the underlying machine that runs intentionality and remote viewing. Is it possible to remote view or resonate with concepts, ideas, so-called material objects, God, the universe, the omniverse? Is it possible? When resonation is great enough with targets like that, then there is no split between subject and object. The split between subject and object begins to collapse. And at this point, when you are in a deep, profound state of resonation with the universe, the omniverse, God, or something that grandiose, one can just rest and bask in that emptiness. And at that point, you get a sense of the unity of form and emptiness, that emptiness is form and form is emptiness. That what we are seeking is right in front of us. That God is in the mundane. That truth is in the mundane. That reality is in the mundane. And there's some kind of Zen quote, I don't know if I can remember it exactly, but a master said, that the truth is in the mundane, and thank God, and it couldn't be any other way. So I think we tend to want to look up or there or outside ourselves or a special place, rather than God could not be any closer We could not be any closer to God than we are at this very moment. When you are in a state of resonation, the mundane glows vividly with connection and vibration. There is only suchness, which is not even suchness, because there is no word that can really begin to describe it. And this resonation also can bring about healing. It can bring about bliss. It can bring about resolution of psychological problems. And when we go there, it can also be done through meditation, and remote viewing could be thought of a way of meditation, or it can be blended with meditation. When we go there, when we resonate, when we lose our boundaries, so to speak, we can take some of this with us. So again, there is never a question, even in our deepest pain, in our deepest pain, that there is one consciousness and that God could not be closer. There is a problem that arises, and that problem is when we start getting impressions from our sense of resonation, from our sense of contact, from asking a question, we get so occupied with the meaning of what we're getting that we forget the functions of existence and non-existence. That is more of a fundamental way of resonating, a fundamental way of being, that we are creators, that we give existence to things, that we are part of existence. And we get caught up in giving meaning and giving overlay, using thoughts, using beliefs, using all sorts of ideation. And we mistaken that for the real thing. We mistaken the word for the real thing. So we lose touch with our ground. We lose touch with our function as resonators. In reality, there are no things out there. In fact, in reality, there are no nouns. And that's one of the tricks of remote viewing. If you're remote viewing and looking for nouns, things out there, then you will cease to remote view. Because in reality, there are only processes. There is only one continual flux and process. And you can distinguish different ones from the other, but there are no nouns in reality. There are no things out there. So to remote view, you have to let go of nouns. You have to let go of things. You have to let go of labels. You have to let go of your left brain to some degree. Also, to perceive the way things really are on all different levels of creation. This also requires something that I and other people have called radical honesty or brutal honesty. I like the word radical honesty. Because to approach a question, to approach a genuine inquiry about something, one has to be radically honest about it. And when one reaches a place of radical honesty, changes take place in the brain. The brain functions differently. It frees us up to see what is real and to face what we need to face. So, another way of looking at this, now Peter Russell yesterday talked about what we perceive and the mind stuff, and is it really real, is it not? There's another theory of perception that I remember when I was taking perception in college, sensation and perception course, based on a theory of resonation, that actually when we are seeing a color, when we are seeing a shape, when we are seeing a line, when we are seeing a person, our neurons are actually resonating. So that when we see red, we are actually resonating in our own nervous system red. So in that sense, we are seeing what is really out there because we are resonating with it. The same thing again happens on a non-local level. And the problem is we mistaken the out there is actually really in here. In other words, as Peter Russell said, we're forming an image in the back of our visual cortex, and a sense of out there is really in here. However, that breaks down when you start to resonate with non-locally. Then the out there becomes the out there. There is no difference between the in here and the out there. So I just wanted to run that theory of perception by you, that all perception is, even physical perception, is based on a form of resonation. And when we are totally resonating, then we are much more likely to be in touch with what's really going on. Okay, I have remote viewed many targets, from the pyramids to the Buddha to the Omniverse, and I have taught others to remote view God themselves, their own birth, their death, their true nature, their parents, their spouse. And I've noticed that when people do this, there are some profound changes that take or can take place, and often do take place within them. There's a magic to this. Last weekend at a workshop, for example, I gave a participant a special remote viewing target. And when you are given a target, traditionally in remote viewing, you are kept blind to what the target is or what it is. And a target could be the Eiffel Tower. It could be anything in the universe. So you don't find out till after your remote viewing session, which takes about an hour to do, what it is that you remote viewed. So it keeps you blind. It keeps you so that you're not biased in terms of what it is you're viewing, so that your mind doesn't get in the way, because as soon as you think you know what the target is, then a different part of the brain interferes with the actual remote viewing process. So the target was her mother. And I gave her that target because I knew to some degree her relationship with her mother, that she was living with her mother, that she had a lot of distress in regards to her mother, a lot of anger in regards to her mother. So I gave it to her. And all she knew is that there was a photo or a description in a folder, and she was remote view whatever was represented in there. So as she went into the session, she began to accurately describe her mother in great detail. She also did what's called a deep mind probe, where you go into the mind of the person. So she actually went into the mind of her mother, and she was describing her mother's worry and pain, as well as her divine core. So she went through all the different levels of her mother's mind. And from my knowledge and from what I heard, it was very, very accurate. She then went through a process of blending, where she actually entered her mother's body and walked a few steps within her mother's body, and also opened her eyes and looked at the world through her mother's eyes. And so she could see the world through her mother's eyes, which she did. After that, I made sure that she backed out, that she separated from her mother. That's an important part of the remote viewing process. And at that time, I had her describe the relationship between this person that she was remote viewing and a secondary person, which was actually herself. So she proceeded under blind condition to describe a relationship between herself and her mother. Still clueless. So I asked her, as she did this, do you feel compassion for this person that you're viewing? And she says, oh yes, very much so. And I could tell that it was very heartfelt. And she sensed the struggles that both these people were going through. Then I asked her, if you were their therapist, what would you tell them? And she proceeded to tell them very clearly what she thought and what she recommended, and that the main thing she was saying is that you are not alone, that you're not alone. And again, her her expression was free of her defenses, free of her biases towards her mother, because she did not know who it was that she was viewing. So she could it sort of liberated from all that baggage. Then I asked her to raise herself to the highest level of consciousness or godliness or clarity possible, and to speak to them from that point, which she also did. And when she was finished, I handed her the folder, and she opened up the folder, and she looked at it, and I've seen this response quite a few times. It's sort of like, oh. And then at that time, she just broke into tears. And she sobbed for 5 or 10 minutes, and at that time, I just comforted her and said it was okay, and tried to give her space to feel some of these feelings that she was feeling, and to begin to assimilate this new perspective. Part of remote viewing is learning to see through new eyes. So she had seen her relationship with her mother through new eyes. And from what I have heard, her relationship in the last few days with her mother has changed radically. So I will continue to monitor this to see how she's doing. But I'm very much enthusiastic about this as a therapeutic process, because I've seen it happen with spouses and other relationships where this kind of thing happens. And then people change because they can see things that they normally would not be able to see, because they would block it out. And they would be able to give themselves and the other person compassion and see through their eyes. So again, very powerful process, and a very powerful new healing modality. There was another session where I gave a person their father, and I knew their father had died a year ago. And when I give targets, one of the things I do is I check here and I check my own intuition. And also if I need permission, I get permission from the actual person or people involved. There is an ethics of remote viewing, and the way I put it is view unto others as you would have others view unto you. So again, she began to get this person, she began to get a sense of communication with this person, a sense of communion, and then all of a sudden she realized it was her father. And she had had so much unfinished business because with him, she did not get a chance to say goodbye. She did not get a chance to really process it. So this opened her up to her father again. She could begin to resolve the stuff with her father, to express some of the things on a non-local level with her father. And it was so satisfying to me to see her gratitude of having done that session, having contacted her father, having had that second chance. And the power of remote viewing is that it contains safeguards to prevent you from clouding stuff from your own imagination. It has built-in procedural safeguards, so you're not getting your own stuff and your own biases and your own thoughts and your own stuff from your own memory banks entangled with your contact. So the contact tends to be much pure, like in a normal psychic session or astral projection session. I'm sure there are exceptions to that, but in general, I think that's true. While remote viewing the Buddha, I have seen participants almost involuntarily drop to their knees in tears, and sort of tears of relief, tears of joy. The sense of never having experienced unbound and unconditional love for the first time in their life. So people can experience things that they've never experienced before, things that they never got from their parents. So it opens up a new part of themselves. It allows them, again, to see the world through new eyes. I've also seen people become actually intoxicated with with the Buddha energy, absolutely in a state of bliss and intoxication from this state. Another Buddha session that I'd like to share with you. Well, often as a group, sometimes half the group can be in tears when they're all remote viewing the same target together. Again, they're all sitting at the same table, but nobody knows what it is they're viewing. So there was one session where a woman just burst out into tears, and she was just sobbing and sobbing. And she had a vision of the Buddha standing before her and was laughing at her. So, and the Buddha spoke to her and said, "You finally got it." And she had drawn this beautiful, exquisite drawing of the Buddha sitting cross-legged. But it wasn't like you finally got the target. It was like, you finally got what I'm about. You finally got what this is about, what existence is about. So again, this sense of relief, sense of joy. And I hear reports months later, years later, from people who said, yes, I still have that in me. It still has opened me up. It's opened my heart. Another powerful target are birth sessions when people remote view their own birth. And this is absolutely one of the most powerful targets that I have ever given, because inevitably people will get it, with few exceptions. And often they will have very powerful experiences. They might not understand it, like, I feel like I'm trapped in Jell-O or custard, and I'm stuck, and I'm trying to get through this canal, and I'm having problems, and I want to kick, and I feel like I'm having problem getting through, and I have to get through. And so their birth, how they were born, even if they were drugged or their mother was drugged, that will all show up in how they were born. And often, when they go through the whole process, they will go into what's called birth primals. And birth primals are basically the really deep feelings that they had before, during, and after birth. When so many babies just get separated from their mother and put in a little cubicle, that is extremely painful. And we think babies don't feel pain. Not true. When you're in the middle of a birth primal, you know it. It's absolutely clear to you that this is real, and that again, to relieve this. So basically, at this time when somebody goes into the birth primal, I will spend the time with them so they can complete the process. And usually afterwards, they will need to be held. They will need to be, they need that sort of holding that infants want. So part of the process is providing that, or having people pair off, where they can provide that for each other. Again, you can only do it once in a workshop, because they have to be kept blind in terms of what it is. So if you've never primaled, if you've never had doesn't have to be a birth primal, but a really deep, total autonomic response to your own pain that's down there, that's stored in the limbic system, that's stored in the brainstem. If you've never had it, it's like you won't understand what I'm talking about, because it's like me describing a color that you haven't seen yet. Okay. There's another process in remote viewing called blending. Now, blending, I've already mentioned before, when she stepped into her mother's body, and she began to feel the aches and pain and the age of her mother, and began to see the world through her mother's eyes. That's called blending. So one of the targets that I give in my medical remote viewing workshops is my 90-year-old mother, who has had a hip replacement, knee replacement, uses a walker, is blind in one eye. So it's amazing what happens is, as a group, sometimes I will have a group, okay, everybody stand up, everybody take one step forward, and then I want you to walk in this person's body. And almost inevitably, they'll all of a sudden, they're like using a walker, and one leg goes in, because exactly how my mother walks. So the accuracy is astounding. And of course, then when we're finished with that, I have them step back out, make sure that they are clearly separated. If they need to clean off their energy fields or have somebody else, I do that. Again, to be able to see the world through the eyes of other people is very important. For example, I can give a target. If I know you have a particular difficulty or problem, I can give you a target where you remote view yourself in the future at a time where you have solved that problem, where you have resolved that problem, so that you can get the insight from yourself, from your future self, and actually see your problem from the eyes of your future self, which is highly effective. So, or you can remote view somebody with a similar problem who has resolved that problem and see through their eyes. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? How did they resolve it? How did they see the problem? What perspective is it in? So blending can be an extremely powerful process. Also, one of the targets I like to give is whirling dervishes, where I will have the group go through the process, and then I'll have everybody stand up together. And I say, okay, I want you to take a step forward, enter the target subjects or people. And again, the target this time is whirling dervishes. Okay, when I count to 3, I want you to spontaneously do whatever you feel like doing. So a certain percentage of the time, everybody will start spinning, and they'll feel this, they'll sense the bliss that the whirling dervishes do. Another fun one is when people go to little kids at a baseball game, and all of a sudden they just start cheering and act like little kids. So it's a lot of fun. They bounce off each other. It forms sort of a group. Yes?
I have a really fundamental question.
Okay, could you wait? And
I have following. I was just wondering, what is remote viewing?
okay.
If it helped me understand the rest of what you're talking about,
Sure.
it sort of sounds like it's hypnosis. That's what I'm getting so far. So could you clarify that for me?
Sure. How many people attended Steve Greer's talk yesterday? He talked somewhat about remote viewing. Remote viewing is a technique in which you are given a target and you're blind to the target, and it could be an event, it could be a person, it could be an object, it could be the Eiffel Tower, it could be the Grand Canyon, it could be God. And it take about an hour going through a process where you're writing words down, you're probing the words, you're doing little squiggles. There's 5 specific phases that you go through, so it's a gradually opening up a window to this target. So I would call it a sub-form of astral projection, except, again, it has controls. It's much more structured. It was used by our military for 20 years, $20 million of taxpayer money went into the development of remote viewing. In 1995, they supposedly dropped the remote viewing program in our government, and a lot of the military remote viewers started teaching the public. So I'm a second generation. So since 95, this is a relatively new technology. It's also ancient, but this particular form of, it's like a highly sharpened blade, highly sharpened tool. Can be used for medicine, can be used for psychology, can be used for physics. Essentially all disciplines, all studies, all aspects of life, there is a potential use for remote viewing. Some people have gotten quite rich remote viewing silver futures, so that has been done. Does that answer your question?
Not really. I
Okay.
know what it looks like. And you're skipping over that part, like that hour, where you position yourself.
Could you just...
Could you just be a little bit more specific of what it looks like during that hour when you're conditioning yourself for the remote viewing,
Okay.
and how that's different than
Actually, I was planning on giving you a little bit of a taste of it during the end. So, Okay. You ready now? You want a remote view? Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I will take a target out of my bag, put it in a folder, and then you can basically see if you can get impressions up on it, and I will show you what it is after this session. So give me a moment. I'll be right back. Okay. I have a target that's represented in here. What's in here is not really the target, it's just a representation of the target. It could be a photograph, it could be a description. It is in here, and I'm going to place it right here. So it is in there, yeah. Yeah, a photograph. The photograph is not the target. The photograph is just a representation of the target. Basically, I'll just give you some hints. We'd have to do a whole remote viewing workshop for me to take you through the actual 5 phases of that. So basically, we're going to do what's called an unstructured session. And basically, the hints I will give you is pay attention to your body. First of all, it helps to have a quiet mind. So if you're sitting straight, with your back straight, feet on the ground, you're breathing, letting your mind quiet. Then out of that quietness, form an intention. Your intention is to go to the target. Your intention is to be present at that target. We have a sense of presence. Just like, notice your sense of presence in this room. What does it feel like to actually be in this room? Notice that sense of presence. It's hard to describe, but it's a sense of actually being there. Let yourself have the intention of actually being present at this target. What will happen is you will start getting sensory impressions. You'll also get sensations in your body. Your body is the first to know. Your mind is the last to know. So this is not a thought process. This is not a detective process. It's an experiencing process. Lose your mind and come to your senses. The impressions you're going to get are not going to be, full Technicolor detailed images. They will be fragmentary and evaporated. They may last a 16th of a second. So you're going to get little pieces and fragments, a taste, a texture, a sound, a shape, a sense of size, a sense of coolness, a sense of smell. And you'll get a sense of energetics. So just pay attention to those things. Just pay attention to those things. And as you attend to those things, the window to this target will gradually open up for many of you. And at the end of my talk, I will have you actually do, on a piece of scrap paper, just do a little quick sketch of how you perceive the target. And when you sketch it, you just sort of feel around the page and just trust your body motions and just put out there whatever wants to be on that page. When people do draw a target that is completely accurate in every detail, I ask them, how did you do that? And the inevitable answer is, I have no idea. I just did it. So that's all I'm going to tell you. Just have fun with it, because if you want to have fun with it, if you just let yourself have fun with it, if you just let yourself play with it, you don't care whether you're right, you're just receptive, you're open to your senses, you'll get the target. The structure gives you a deeper way to go. So, but I don't have time for that at this workshop. Okay, let's move on. Another target that is very powerful is God. And one of the interesting sort of artifacts or experiences people get when they remote view God is they start getting dizzy. They actually physically start getting dizzy. It's sort of like so overwhelming that it's sort of a sense of, it's not an unpleasant sense of dizziness. It can be a little overwhelming, but it's not unpleasant. And what I invite people to do is just surrender to that dizziness, surrender to whatever is going on to the extent that they're willing. I don't push anybody into it. And people will have also profound experiences. Again, not uncommon to have tears of joy, dancing, moving around. Also, a target like God has sort of a restructuring effect, because it's sort of, as you surrender to this, it sort of breaks up your own mental structure, your old mental structures, your old beliefs, your old stuff that you hang on to, because as you're in this energy, nothing can really maintain its normal form. It has to change. So it sort of breaks you up so that you can reform in a different shape, a different form interiorly. So in a way, it's cognitive, emotional, and spiritual restructuring. Another target that I've done, blind condition, is the Omniverse. The Omniverse is one step above the universe. The Omniverse is everything in all universes, basically. So if I'm going to recall my experience, I was picking up some kind of crystalline type structure, but it was not just like a crystal. It was multidimensional, hyperspace, in other words, the crystal was not an ordinary time-space, but it was a sense of crystalline structure. Several crystalline structures, sort of an array of crystalline structures, and which was vibrant, alive, multidimensional, and then almost like little nodes of consciousness also embedded at different points in these structures and around these structures. And then there was a sense of this flow, and maybe that was the main thing that I was getting, that all was flow, everything was flow. There was nothing that was not flow. And that the flow was it. It was the beginning, and the end was the flow. And that there was a flow between these centers of consciousness. And when Stephen Greer was describing the planets and as centers of consciousness, you'll absolutely get that when you remote view them. You'll get that with the solar system, you'll get that with the galaxy, you'll get that with the sun. That there is consciousness, that they are centers of consciousness, and galaxy clusters, and on and on. So just the sense of wonderful dance, communication, and within these crystalline structures, and there was nothing outside. There was nothing outside. And again, I can't put it into, that's the best sort of this world type of description that I can give. I would certainly invite you to study remote viewing so that you can do these kind of targets. Another target that I like to give to people is one's true nature. What the viewer's true nature, and people get this sense of being sort of a little offshoot or peninsula or like a galactic little offshoot of a much higher source, but they're connected. Their sense of connectedness, that they're not separated from the source. And again, people really, really get a better sense of who they are that way. Christ, the crucifixion, also, they pick up the passion, not the pain of Christ in the usual sense of passion, but the really passionate feelings that the Christ had, the compassion, the love, and also the suffering he went through. Now, what happens when you are remote viewing is, I mentioned, that you will get sensations in your body. And your body is the first to know. Your body will tell you about this target. Your autonomic nervous system will tell you about this target. Very true in lower animals, just like when the tsunami came, the animals who are basically driven by autonomic processes all headed for the hills. The humans stayed. So that the animals were not affected near as much by the tsunami because they knew it was coming. which reminds me of another little story. A couple of weeks ago, I was soaking in a hot springs with my wife, Pivy, up in Canada, and I turned to her and I said, I got this feeling in my body, and I said, something just happened to the Pope. And he had died within 3 hours of that. So at least his reported death was in 3 hours of that. So once you begin to recognize the stuff from doing targets, you certainly pick up on your daily life. And that's one of the most important aspects of remote viewing, is applying this to your daily life. Not only to remote view life-changing targets, but to really trust those inner, what I call truth buttons in your body that are telling you something is going on, what's true about something. And again, tying truth buttons in with radical honesty. The more honest you can become, the better remote viewer you're going to be. The more you're going to be able to see things the way they are. And part of honesty is realizing that, gee, I don't know how to be honest. That's the starting place. That, gee, I thought I knew how to be honest, but if I really look, gee, I'm not sure. This is sort of new. I've never asked that question. And really being that honest to really recognize that you don't know how to be honest sometimes in a certain place. Because we weren't allowed to be honest as children. Very few of us were really allowed to be honest as children. Okay, these truth buttons, they're sort of like a tingly sensation, a sort of an excited sensation, almost like a fearful sensation, but not without the fear. But you'll feel the adrenaline. Sometimes I'll feel it in my arms and my fingers, this tingly. But you have the feeling that this is not from me. This did not come from me. This came from some kind of resonance with something else. And you begin to recognize, and it's, of course, everybody will have different truth buttons. They'll experience it in different ways. And if you pay attention to your body, for example, one woman was trying to describe the target this way, and basically her body knew what the target was. The target was a Ferris wheel. So she was trying to describe it this way. Her very next target, she was trying to describe the target this way. The target was Mother Teresa praying. So she was not aware of that. So the more you pay attention, the more you involve your body in the remote viewing process, the better remote viewer you will be. So if you talk like an Italian when you're doing a session, you'll get much better target contact. And some of the military remote viewers actually consider remote viewing a physical discipline, like a martial art.